Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone podcast, episode number 709, for the 8th of May, 2022. Richard Saunders coming to you from Sydney, Australia. What's on this week's episode of the Skeptic Zone? The question on everybody's mind at the moment. We're going to kick off with an interview with Susan Gerbic, our dear friend and frequent visitor to the show. This time, Susan will be interviewed by our reporter, Adrian Hill, which is sort of a bit funny in a way because Susan does so many things for the Skeptic Zone anyway. But anyway, Susan and Adrian were recently on a big tour of the east coast of the United States. And as you'll hear in this interview, Susan places a lot of importance on visiting local skeptical groups. And I heartily agree. I think that's a great idea. And also you'll hear about a new award Susan received. And listen carefully for the curse. Susan mentions a curse regarding UFOs. After that interview, it's the Australian Skeptics News, read by me this week, filling in for Adrian Hill. That's interesting. Following that, it's the Book of Tim with part 2 of his look at the history of Father Christmas or Santa Claus. And then talking about UFOs, to round off the show, Trove dives back into the UFO files to find historical reports of stories regarding unidentified flying objects, alien spaceships, the Enterprise, who knows what else, in the Trove segment today. So no matter what you're doing this weekend, maybe you've gone away for a little weekend away to pamper yourself. Sounds good to me. Oh, I wish I was there. Are you at a retreat? Have you gone to the mountains? Maybe you're by a lake or on a cruise. No matter what you're doing, I hope you're enjoying yourself. But now it's time for me to run downstairs and see if I can find a bagel, maybe. Some smoked salmon, a bit of avocado. Ooh, a little bit of pepper on top of that. Sounds good to me. While I do that, I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone. You can count on Adrian with Adrian Hill.
Hello, it's Adrian Hill from Canada, but right now I'm actually in Raleigh, North Carolina, and I'm staying with skeptical friends Ramiro and Faith. And I have to say, they put me up in a very interesting room because hidden inside the bedroom closet, they found a spooky message about a year after they purchased the house, and it says, "Whoever has this house next, beware. It's haunted." But so far, I have been very disappointed in the lack of spirit activity. But joining me today is Susan Gerbic. Hey, Susan.
Hi, Adrian. Ooh, spooky.
Yes, and Susan twisted my very rubber arm to join her as a photographer and GSOW sticker distributor on a speaking tour in the Eastern U.S. for 2 weeks. And I'm really excited to be here, but we started in Washington, D.C. last week, and something very exciting happened. And apparently it was supposed to happen a little while ago, and it just didn't happen because of something called a pandemic. So can you tell us about that?
Right. So I received the Philip Klass Award, which is awarded from the National Capital Area Skeptics that are in Maryland, D.C. area. And it's for outstanding contributions in critical thinking and scientific understanding. The first award was given in 2006 to Michael Shermer, then to James Randi, Robert Park, who's a professor of physics, then Paul Kurtz, then Ray Hyman, Joel Achenbach, who's a writer for the Washington Post, then Penn and Teller, Phil Plait, Stephen Salzberg, who's a computer scientist, and then lastly to John Mayer, who's an astrophysicist and a Nobel laureate in physics, and now me.
Well, that's very exciting.
Yeah, it was very exciting to get the award. It was
And
fun.
it's a beautiful award, too.
Oh my gosh, I wish I had it with me. It's super heavy. I can't travel with it, but it is really nice. They're going to mail it to my house.
Based on what you just read, you are the first woman to ever have received it.
Yeah, as far as I know, I'm the first to receive it. That's female.
Can you tell us about Philip J. Klass?
So Philip J. Klass is, or was, one of the premier UFOologists. He was an expert in all things UFO, and he's been preceded by, of course, Robert Schaefer and Mick West, as well as other people. But this is really fun. I'm gonna read this to you because this is the last will and testament of Philip J. Klass, according to what I've been able to see. So this is really fun. To ufologists who publicly criticize me or who even think unkind thoughts about me in private, I do hereby leave and bequeath the UFO curse. No matter how long you live, you will never know any more about UFOs than you know today. You will never know any more about what UFOs really are or where they come from. You will never know any more about what the U.S. government really knows about UFOs than you know today. As you lie on your own deathbed, you will be as mystified about UFOs as you are today, and you will remember this curse. So this is supposedly his last will and testament, and part of it. And he died in 2005.
Yeah, that's a wonderful curse. And I believe it was Ross Blotcher that sent that to you.
Yeah,
correct?
Ross Blotcher reminded me of this curse, and I thought that was great. It's on Philip Klass's Wikipedia page now.
And so you did a talk there as well, and that went very well, and you had some interesting questions. And you're talking tonight as well. Today is, what is it, May 3rd?
Yeah, we're talking to the Triangle Skeptics here in the North Carolina area, so that should be a lot of fun. And then we fly out tomorrow to go to the Center for Inquiry in Amherst, New York.
Yeah, and I'm excited about that. I've never been to, actually, all these places. I've never been to Washington, D.C. I've never been to Raleigh, and I have never been to Amherst. So.
Well, this is what it's like living and hanging out with me, you know. I go all over the place. I like to go to the smaller groups. I mean, it's a lot of fun to visit the big conferences and do talks there. But, I mean, there's a lot of places that are the small little groups that people haven't had a lot of attention by speakers. And I think they really deserve it. So, you know, if you want to have me out for a talk, please let me know and I'll do my best to get there.
Well, and it's so fun because we have dinner and we walk around and we do a little bit of touring. We have met such great people and had dinner, as I say, and lunch and walked around like Scott Snell and Robin Blumner. That was really exciting.
Right.
And we met with Jeff Gelbach when we arrived in Raleigh and went up to this beautiful restaurant and had a view of the whole city. It was a really, really...
It's all about the people,
yeah,
really
exactly.
it is.
It's very social.
We're trying, the mission of the About Time Project, which is the nonprofit that I run, is not necessarily to bust psychics and to write Wikipedia pages. It's always has been and it always will be about the people, trying to grow our movement, trying to get people to become more social and to be more involved in the projects, because we are a collective. And if we can't get us together all on the same page and working towards the same goals of scientific skepticism, we're going to fail.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And this has been a great time to meet these people that I have only seen on Zoom. And right now sitting with us is Ramiro. Say hi, Ramiro.
Hello, everyone. I've been listening to the podcast for a while now, and so this is surreal, I guess, to be in the podcast.
Yeah. All the way from North Carolina.
Exactly.
He's been watching and listening to the podcast. That's great.
It is awesome. So I'm going to be leaving Amherst, but Susan is continuing her tour. Can you give some times and dates, please?
Yes, absolutely. I'm going to be continuing my tour. I was willing to go just about anywhere, but a lot of people are not quite ready to meet in person, and they didn't have a place to meet at because, you know, several of the groups have kind of stopped doing in-person events for the last few years. So I'm going to be in St. Louis, Missouri on the 11th of May. So you want to check out the St. Louis Skeptics if you're in that area. And then on the 13th, Friday, the 13th,
Ooh.
I will be in Denver, Colorado, giving a talk to the Denver Skeptics. And then I'll be flying home the next day, the 14th, back to California. So, you know, it'll be 19 days on the road. Another thing, is funny what Romero said. He's been a longtime fan of the Skeptic Zone, and he's been listening, and here he is now on the podcast. We have a new editor who just joined our GSOW project named Sarah, and she's in Woodstock, Georgia, which is an awful long way from Australia. And she found the GSOW from the Skeptic Zone, and I think it's really fun, and give her a nice shout out.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's so exciting. Well, anyway, this has been a real blast, Susan. I am so happy that you have invited me on this tour. I was very hesitant, I think mostly because of COVID. And this is my first trip that I've made during COVID that is substantial. And I'm so glad I made the decision to come, because it has been wonderful, and I'm really hoping I get to do this again.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming and hanging out with me. It's been more as the photographer, is just having a companion to travel with and help and get lost and go to the wrong airports.
Oh, my goodness.
Oh, yeah, those kinds of things, be late for planes and try to figure out Ubers and all that kind of stuff. It's been a lot of fun. We're also joined on our tour by Kelly Burke for a couple days.
That's correct. And that was so fun.
Another GSOW editor.
Correct. We've talked lots of times over Zoom, but have never met in person. So that was really fun. And we got to go see a play, a musical at the Ford Theater
in Washington, D.C. That's where Lincoln was assassinated a long time ago. And so there's a lot to see. It's been a blast, and I'd really like to come out and talk to more groups. We will be having, don't forget, coming up in July, we're going to be doing the Bay Area Skeptics, all virtual, is going to have a conference over Zoom on the 15th, 16th, and 17th of July. So everybody's got to come out to see that. And hey, don't forget, there's going to be a bunch of conferences coming up. There's the QED coming up in Manchester, and I think it's October 28th. Of this year, and SciCon. You can't miss SciCon if you're anywhere near Vegas, or you can get to Las Vegas. That's going to be October 20th and onward. So if you have any questions about SciCon, please get in touch. I am happy to give you my wisdom of traveling to Vegas, as well as hanging out with people and getting to know people and where to eat, all that great stuff. It's going to be a blast. So 2022 is going to be a great year, and remember, the magic numbers are always 5, 5, 5.
That's awesome. Thanks so much, Susan. And now I think after that, it's time to go downstairs and eat my leftover chicken fried steak and fried green tomatoes.
Don't forget those hush puppies.
Until next time, this is Adrienne Hill signing off.
I'm a psychic. My name is Psychic Carrie.
I'm Ross.
Oh, what a pleasure to meet you. Of course, I knew your name was Ross, as I'm a psychic. But please, take a seat.
Well, I was hoping we could talk about my
your
podcast.
podcast. Yes, I know.
It's called Oh No, Ross and Carrie.
Yes.
We investigate fringe science, spirituality, and claims of the paranormal. You took the words right out of my mouth.
Yes. This whole podcast, it sounds like it's been a real challenge for you lately.
Actually, it's a lot of fun.
Yes, exactly. Because it's so fun.
I don't know how you do it.
This will be $75.
Okay, that seems fair.
Oh No, Ross and Carrie.
At MaximumFun.org. You knew it was a .org.
I have a gift.
Hello, this is Richard Saunders filling in for Adrienne Hill from Canada, who normally brings you the Australian Skeptics newsletter, written by Tim Mendham, of course. Well, Adrienne, as you just heard, is on tour, so I'm filling in. Yes, Adrienne, I'll simply always be an understudy for you. Australian Skeptics newsletter number 147. And this arrived in my inbox on the 2nd of May. Hi all, it says... With a federal election only weeks away, it is important to keep an eye on those minor parties and their conspiratorial, anti-science policies, often hidden behind benign party names. Some have been with us for a while, in one name or another, and some have grown out of the, quote, sovereign citizen, end quote, and anti-lockdown movements. Vote how you like, but make sure you do your own research. Read on, Tim. Okay, Tim, that's what we'll do. Australian Skeptics News. Concerns over anti-vaxxers' $280,000 raised for flood support. There have been problems in the past about anti-vaxxers raising funds for their campaigns and how the money is spent. This story concerns a group with known anti-vax and conspiratorial leanings raising money for flood victims. Note, this is a Crikey article and most articles there are behind paywalls. Hopefully this one is accessible generally. And of course that reminds me to remind you that all the stories you get when you get the Australian Skeptics newsletter delivered come with links to the stories mentioned. Anti-vaxxers running in federal election. Interesting look at anti-vaxxers and conspiracy theorists, either as individuals or whole parties, running in the coming election. This item links to a Twitter account, and while we don't know who the author Celery Sorbet is, the account has interesting info on some of the lesser lights of politics. What Britons really think about the afterlife. Sponsored by a company that makes ghost hunting gear, so there may be a vested interest there. A survey of more than 1,000 people in the UK found that 50% believe in an afterlife, and of those who do, 60% believe we will all experience the same thing after death. Of those who believe in heaven or hell, 55% believe they'll go to heaven, but 58% still worry about going to hell. And yes, assuming you don't have conflicted people knowing they'll go to heaven, but are not really sure, that does make 113%. In any case, 40% believe they've seen a ghost, and 33% have actively attempted to contact the dead. Comfortingly, 40% believe they'll be reunited with their pet after death. Believe in science? You should be more skeptical of science and scientists. A somewhat exaggerated headline for an article that is not skeptical of science, but warns about the results that are sometimes reported. Quote, "The problem today is not that we have too few data, but we have too much data, which seduces researchers into ransacking it for patterns that are easy to find, likely to be coincidental, and unlikely to be useful." Nigerian Critical Thinking Group. Noted Nigerian skeptic Leo Igwe and his colleagues have started a Facebook group for their Critical Thinking Society Empowerment Foundation. They are looking for people to join and follow their activities. They run critical thinking workshops for teachers and students. They are asking for donations to help keep the program going in schools and across the regions. The newsletter goes on to mention the current issue of The Skeptic, the journal from Australian Skeptics, with a link to a sample article you can download, but simply go to skeptics.com.au to subscribe and find out more. And don't forget you can read most of the back issues at that website completely free. And we have some items of interest. Things you should know before visiting a psychic reader. Quite reasonable advice from a Catholic site in Brazil, though some articles read like they were translated by Google. One concern about this article is that there is no mention of psychics researching the customer on social media before a meeting, which is a major scam among practitioners. The article does suggest, quote, "use a reputable psychic reader and make sure they are licensed," end quote, which indicates that the industry might be more regulated in Brazil than it is in Australia. $1 million challenge to support the Turin Shroud. Expert on, quote, "revered relic," end quote, has called on the British Museum to back up the results of its disputed carbon dating tests. Quote, "If it is a forgery, show how it was done." End quote. We thought that there were already enough suggestions on this to counter and debunk the, quote, "burst of radiation," end quote, supernatural explanations. But $1 million? And finally, silly story of the week. I can hear Adrian giggling already. A woman claims her haunted doll collection is scaring off her neighbours. A woman explained that shortly after she began collecting the haunted dolls, neighbours began to move out of the apartment building. No suggestion that her obsession with haunted dolls might have contributed to their decision to leave, and no proof that the story is true, apart from a paranormal investigator who says it's unlikely dolls can be possessed. The story is based on a Twitter and TikTok users' comments. Impossible to verify. And that was the highlights from the Australian Skeptics newsletter number 147. And don't forget, you can get this newsletter delivered to your inbox every other week, simply by signing up at skeptics.com.au. With thanks again for Tim Mendham for putting this all together, and thanks to Adrian Hill for letting me be her understudy for this week.
Be Reasonable is the interview show from the Merseyside Skeptic Society, where each month I speak to someone about their fringe beliefs. Over the years I've spoken to psychics, UFO believers, moon landing deniers, flat earthers, hollow earthers, and all manner of unusual conspiracy theorists. But I've also talked to AIDS denialists, white supremacists, gay conversion therapists. I even interviewed Jim Humble, the inventor of Miracle Mineral Supplement, a form of industrial bleach that he and his followers use to treat cancer and HIV. This isn't a debate show, and my aim isn't to win an argument. But when we listen to how people promote and justify the ideas that we disagree with, even the dangerous ones, I think we become much more effective at countering those ideas. If that sounds like something you'd be interested in, look for Be Reasonable on Apple Podcasts and everywhere else that podcasts live.
And now, a reading from the Book of Tim with Tim Mendham.
Hi, I'm Tim Mendham. I'm the Executive Officer of Australian Skeptics Inc., and I'm the editor of our quarterly magazine, The Skeptic, which you can download most of the issues for free from our website, skeptics.com.au. And today I'm reading part 2 of an article on Santa Claus and Christmas, and about all the aspects and appurtenances associated with it. This was written by Anthony Wheeler and was published in The Skeptic magazine, December 2015. Which is volume 35, number 4. And let's move on from a look at the history of Santa Claus or Saint Nicholas, and look at getting into the idea of Christmas. And, there's a lot of religious things about Christmas, so be prepared for that in this story. There are no explicit clues in the Bible as to Christ's birthday. The early Eastern Christian Church celebrated the birth of Christ in conjunction with the Epiphany, honouring Christ's baptism on the 6th of January, and later, in the West, commemorated the manifestation of Christ to the Gentiles as exemplified by the 3 Magi, the wise men. Meanwhile, other early Christians celebrated Christ's birthday on the 20th of May to settle disputes between the Eastern and Western Christian churches. In about 350 CE, Pope Julian set the date of Christ's birthday as the 25th of December. There are 2 main reasons for choosing this date. One was that Christ's birth marked a new beginning in man's relationship with God, and the winter solstice, about 21st of December, the shortest day of the year from when the days start dawning earlier and ending later again, marked the new beginning of the coming year. Perhaps the Australian Christmas should be celebrated on the 20th of June. This would fit the winter solstice in the southern hemisphere, but I doubt it would be popular. A second reason is that many pagan festivals celebrated the solstice at the end of the harsh winter as a portent of better times to come for many, warmer spring weather and the crops growing again. The most quoted is the Roman festival of Saturnalia, god of agriculture, celebrated on the 17th of December. Rather than risking unpopularity by suppressing these pagan festivals, the Christian Church instead took them over, changing the focus of the celebration from the movement of the sun to the birth of God's child on earth. We have 5 main sources for the trappings of our Christmas: the Roman celebration of Saturnalia, which is presents and merrymaking, the winter solstice celebrations, holly, St. Nicholas, stockings, the symbolism of the Christian Church, holly and minced pies, plus some modern innovations such as cards and candles. The Roman celebration of Saturnalia and similar festivals included wild revelry without restraint, with even the slaves enjoying a temporary liberty. This is the origin of the merrymaking, though rather more restricted now, that became associated with the celebration of Christ's birth. The exchanging of presents also dates back to Saturnalia. Holly, as an evergreen, represents continuing life and hope through the long, dim, cold winter, in the same way as the evergreen conifers. The red berries represented to some the drops of blood shed by Christ for mankind, and the prickly leaves Christ's crown of thorns given by his captors. However, these two events are of course associated with Christ's death at Easter time rather than his birth at Christmas. Evergreen trees, bright lights and red colour were typical of the bringing back the sun winter solstice celebrations. The evergreen tree was an early pagan symbol of the winter solstice and the maintenance of life throughout the depths of winter. It first appeared in Germany in medieval 16th century times as a Christmas tradition. When St. Nicholas gave his gift of gold to the 3 poor girls, as we covered in part 1 of this presentation, he may have surreptitiously dropped the coins through smoke holes in their roofs, from where the coins fell into their stockings hung before the fire to dry. Not surprisingly, once the word spread, others hung stockings before their fires in the hope of receiving similar surprises. Alternatively, stockings have long been the traditional safe place for keeping one's savings. Either way, Clement Moore's description of the habit in the Visit of St. Nicholas made the stocking custom popular. The biblical story of creation states that, "And there was evening and there was morning one day," which is Genesis chapter 1 verse 5. Hence a day starts the preceding evening, and to the celebration of Christ's birthday properly starts on the evening of the 24th, which is Christmas Eve. The 26th of December is St. Stephen's Day. In Britain, this is known as Boxing Day, after the custom of giving presents in a box. Hence the descriptions of a Christmas box being a collection of gifts to people owed a debt of gratitude. Though these days the actual box is no longer used and the gifts are more usually money. The Church reinterpreted Saturnalia's giving of presents as commemorating God's gift, his Son, to mankind. The Christmas box itself remains as the collecting box used in churches to collect gifts for distribution to the needy. A tiny oblong pie with a pastry doll lying inside represented Christ's cradle. The pie was filled with minced meat, often lamb's tongue or mutton, hence it was called a mince meat pie or mince pie. The returning crusaders introduced spices to replace the meat. The oblong cradle became round, but the name and the association with Christmas stuck. The first letter of Christ in Greek, Christos, is chi, written like a capital X with a wavy diagonal line. Because of the similarity to our X, the abbreviation of Christ's Mass to Xmas was inevitable in the days when all writing was by hand. For others, the X represents St. Andrew's cross, or perhaps the cross of other saints, or the cross of the crucifixion. Sir Henry Cole, from 1808 to 1882, was an English civil servant and inventor. He wanted to improve the public's appreciation of arts and culture. To this end, he devised the postal service, constructed the Albert Hall, inspired the 1851 Great Exhibition, inaugurated the Victorian Albert Museum, and invented the Christmas card. The Christmas card was based on the established St. Valentine's Day card, incorporating the French fashion of conveying Christmas wishes in verse and a set piece of seasonal schoolwork where pupils wrote copperplate Christmas wishes to their parents on a decorated sheet. Together with an item of commissioned artwork painted on the front, The card was highly symbolic and morally uplifting. Sir Henry Cole and the nursery rhyme Old King Cole bear no relation, though in an early 18th century depiction, Old King Cole looks surprisingly like our image of Santa Claus. The candles on the tree have been ascribed to the German Protestant Martin Luther, wanting a symbol of the beauty of the clear night sky sparkling with stars on Christmas Eve. The candles on the tree were Luther's analogy of those stars to represent God's glory. The tinsel may have had the same purpose, possibly inspired by glistening spiders' webs. The candles have fortunately been replaced now by much safer electric lights. The Christmas tree with its candles was not initially popular with the British. The first recorded use was at a Christmas party given by Princess Caroline in 1821. Dickens disparaged the innovation as the new German toy. Attitudes changed quickly when Albert, the Prince Consort, had a Christmas tree erected at Windsor Castle, and from then the custom was popular. The tree was usually the Norwegian spruce, though any evergreen, preferably a conifer, will serve. And so, from the myths of Dutch settlers, the ancient Roman celebration of Saturnalia, the celebration of the winter solstice as the portent of better times to come, the example of the good St. Nicholas, the symbolism of the Christian Church, and some modern innovations, we have our modern Father Christmas and all the trappings of our annual celebration. Ho, ho, ho. And that's Father Figure by Anthony Wheeler from the Skeptic magazine, December 2015, which is volume 35, number 4, which you can download from the Skeptic site, skeptics.com.au, along with most other issues of the magazine, for free. Merry Christmas.
Kyle from the Data Skeptic podcast. If you're curious about the way data is changing our world, topics like AI and all this craziness with Facebook and bots and the Twitter storm and how the algorithms that underline that work, and you don't want a technical deep dive, you want it in the vernacular in a way that people can understand, check us out at Data Skeptic. That's what we try and do. I interview advanced professionals in the field who do this sort of research, and then I get into interesting projects as well. We're a weekly show, and you can find us at dataskeptic.com.
Once again to head back to those Trove archives at trove.nla.gov.au, the treasure trove, the trove of goodies, digital goodies waiting for you to explore, digitized newspapers, magazines, gazettes, and all sorts of things going back many, many years, generations, you might say. And this week we're going to explore another topic we've covered before, but why not? It's an evergreen, and it's dear to my heart. UFOs. Oh, UFOs, the gift that just keeps on giving decade after decade after decade, regardless of what you think of them. And we'll begin our trip this week on a UFO from the student publication Tharunka, volume 37, issue 14, October the 22nd, 1991. And on page 7, what do we find? UFO feature. Is it a bird? Is it a plane? No, it's an unidentified flying object. You idiot. And welcome to the first ever International UFO Conference in Australia, entitled The UFO Mystery. The conference, held in September, features 7 speakers, 3 from overseas, each of whom discussed his or her speciality. Speakers explored the nature of such diverse topics as time and space, crop circles, abductions, and various other UFO phenomena, with even a few ETs, extraterrestrials, for those of you not au fait with the lingo, thrown in for good measure. Before I continue, I'd like you all to be aware of the immense courage required in actually attending a conference of this nature. Friends, so-called, snigger behind one's back. Dinner parties fall silent, as if one just revealed a propensity for axing one's grandmother and presenting said person stuffed with sage and onion for dinner. I may as well have. Hoary academics shook their heads gravely. I had crossed the floor, become a lost cause, a shingle short. Had I become a sensitive, new age, over-the-top, post-80s lollipop? What can I say? I did it because it was there. So were lots of others. The Siebel Townhouse function room was packed with, well, people, I think, dressed carefully for the first day's lectures. I thought Darlinghurst black appropriate. I didn't want to draw any attention to myself or attract whatever unearthly types I was sure would be present. I didn't have to worry, however, as everyone appeared grossly conventional to the point of innocuous. However, I wasn't convinced. I was sure there were some disguised aliens checking me out. No doubt, partial to lean, feral, black-and-tied humanoids to add to their outer space collection. My eyes scoured the rows, only to meet 600 pairs of other eyes. We were all playing the same game. Pick the alien. Australian Bill Chalker, author of The Australian UFO Experience, discussed ground marks and other physical evidence. One of the main problems he outlined in exploring UFO phenomena was that many sightings consisted of only verbal evidence when physical evidence was what was needed, more so when verbal testimony was generally overlooked or denied. Some cases lend themselves more easily to physical evidence. A detailed investigation was conducted in Provence, France, in 1981, which confirmed sightings of a structured object landing from landmarks and vegetation exposed to considerable gamma radiation and electromagnetic fields. French intelligence has since become involved in the intrigue and is carrying out tests and simulating experiments. The Australian experience is less encouraging in its official investigation efforts. Bill Chalker is the first civilian researcher to gain direct access to the files of the Royal Australian Air Force, which he discovered are not especially illuminating. The RAAF running a poor second to the investigative talents of the CIA, which does not stand for the Catering Institute of Australia, as someone in the audience proclaimed. Chalker has been re-examining several well-known Australian cases, including the Tully saucer nests, Queensland, 1966, the Deddington melted road tar, Tasmania, 1987, the Dingle Beach truck driver and disappearing witness, i.e. they absconded without leaving a forwarding address, and the 1988 Mundrabilla black dust in the car case, more commonly known as the famous Nullarbor incident. And incidentally, Nullarbor is a desert area in Australia. Australian Anthony Drew has been researching UFOs for the past 15 years, investigating world grid patterns and UFO activity. Geometrically linked locations such as the Bermuda Triangle of Florida and the Devil's Sea south of Japan, which are noted for mysterious disappearances, may be located along ley lines or meridians that act as acupuncture points for the world. Positions of these ley lines were given different names by different cultures, but a common belief was shaped of there being link-up points of creativity and energy. Amazonian folklore tells of its hypothetical center of Amazonian women. Likewise, Egypt's beginnings near the pyramids goes back to a cultural basis. Australian locations on grid lines were unexplained phenomena have occurred include military posts that appear to have a natural power environmentally, such as Pine Gap. I'm not sure if that last sentence actually scans very well, but nevertheless. Alice Springs, Woomera, Bass Strait, and certain Aboriginal sacred sites also link up to ley lines and planetary grid patterns. Jerome Clark, editor of the American magazine International UFO Report, discussed officialdom and UFOs, questioning government activity and practicing disinformation and cover-up. Much of Clark's theme was anecdotal, possibly from necessity. However, there is only so much rumor and hearsay a person can take. Some of the Air Force stories were more than interesting, although the audience became confused by the inclusion of both American comedian Jackie Gleason and Nixon, apparently working together in various top-secret projects. Urban myth or reality? At this point, I don't care. If extraterrestrials get their kicks by playing hide-and-seek and frightening the living daylights out of little earthlings, so be it. What I want to know is, do they suffer from PMT? If so, they may well as stay where they are, as they are of no earthly good to us. How is the search for extraterrestrial intelligence going? Asks Brian O'Leary, ex-NASA astronaut and Apollo team 1967-1968. O'Leary comes well documented. He is the author of the books Space 1999 and Exploring Inner and Outer Space, and was a professor of space sciences and physics at Princeton. He has served on the congressional staff and as advisor to presidential candidates. In 1989, he addressed the Japanese parliament, calling for a joint US-Soviet-Japanese mission to Mars. However, an intelligence source has just recently revealed that the Apollo team didn't actually go anywhere at all, but just pretended to. Apparently, it was all done with mirrors. One waits for O'Leary's lecture with some trepidation, expecting it to be confounded by the man's brilliance on quantum physics. However, his powers of communication more than equal his qualifications. He is neither patronizing nor excessively facile. He sees science knowledge reduced to a system, a box, left-brained, engineered, materialistic, deterministic. Transcendental sciences have no place in this box, and by virtue, no place in society. The paradigm needs to be expanded to a whole new science. A new science which embraces the new reality to include the transcendental experience, the paranormal. O'Leary showed slides of NASA satellite photographs revealing mysterious shapes on Mars. One called The Face on Mars was described as a possible artifact of extraterrestrials in the press release. However, O'Leary left me with an impression of grand ennui on this topic, an appetite jaded by overzealous ET bounty hunters. He did mention that photos from Viking 10 years later rendered the face in all 3 dimensions, and in 1992 a trip to Mars is planned with a new high-resolution camera which will reveal more information. It was possible, he added flatly. It was a monument. O'Leary is obviously happier discussing the meaning of consciousness and the relationship between length, time, and mass, and its distortion the closer to light it gets, transcending reality. The seminar was worth attending just to hear O'Leary speak, as he is a natural communicator. Jenny Randles, author of 14 UFO books, has had the dubious honour of lecturing to the British Parliament on UFOs, which might have woken it up. Unfortunately, Jenny Randles' crop circle theory came a cropper. And it says here in brackets, sorry for the bad joke. Shortly after her visit there, when 2 rather geriatric ex-arts students gleefully admitted on British television to the debauched hobby of creating these curious circles in their spare time. Apparently, they have been trudging the length and breadth of England for years in weather fair and foul, drawing perfect circles whenever they could find a spot. I suppose these two old codgers managed a quick migration to Australia in the off-season to put their authentic stamp on our paddocks. Frankly, I'm putting my money on Little Green Men, a far more credible proposition. A bizarre but well-organised seminar, although I was disappointed that no holographic UFOs were darting around the foyer, as promised, and the robotic alien was suffering from a touch of rheumatism, by the look of it. I only wish I could show you the photo of the alleged alien, snapped by a British policeman, but I am unable to reproduce it due to copyright laws. Suffice it to say that it lost something in the translation. Well, space cases, if that wasn't enough for you, why not join the first international crop circle tour, leaving soon, by contacting 02977 1654. That's all I have to say, so fly me to the moon and let me swing upon a star and ride upon a moonbeam from Jupiter to Mars. In other words, bon voyage. And that was a great report. Wow, what a fun report that was from all the way back in 1991. And it resembles the UFO paranormal conferences I've gone to over the years. It really does. That's fascinating. And again, that comes from the pages of Thrunker. And I am keen to see who wrote that, but I can't see who the author is. But it may interest you to know later on in the magazine it talks about clubs and societies on campus. Banking and Finance Club. We have the Chocoholics Frenzy. That sounds good. Geography Society, Hang Gliding Club, Political Science Society, Underwater Club. That sounds interesting. University of New South Wales Orchestra and Symphonic Wind Ensemble Concert. Industrial Design Society, Game Players. Lots of things. And now the next item we find is a very short item indeed, and one line is sort of obliterated due to the reproduction here. Anyway, it's from the Canberra Times, dated the 10th of June 1968. It says, 50 attend UFO talks. The Commonwealth Aerial Phenomenon Investigations Organisation held its... Now, this is the line that's obliterated. I think it says national something. It's very hard to say. The next line says unidentified flying objects in Canberra at the weekend. About 50 people attended the 3 sessions on Saturday when the convention papers were given, and yesterday's delegates from the societies in 4 states reported their activities. So there we go. There was a UFO meeting, at least of some description, way back in 1968. And further to that, we have another report here from the 6th of June 1968 in the Canberra Times again. UFO body meets in Canberra. About 40 people, including scientists, businessmen, public servants and housewives, will gather in Canberra at the weekend to talk about unidentified flying objects. Representatives of the UFO societies in 4 states and the ACT will discuss papers on topics such as the problems of contacts with extraterrestrials and the implications of scientific research on UFOs. The occasion is the 3rd National UFO Conference arranged by CAPIO, C-A-P-I-O, the Commonwealth Aerial Phenomena Investigations Organisation, the federal body of Australia's UFO societies. The president of the Canberra UFO Research Society, Mr. H. Zwank-Houston, I think it's pronounced, said yesterday the major recent development in UFO study was a change in public attitudes. Only 5 or 6 years ago, most people laughed at the idea of UFOs. Now they accept that there are such things. They don't ridicule them as much as they used to. He said only about 10% of members of UFO societies claimed sightings. The conference will open at the Academy of Science at 8:30 p.m. on Saturday. 1968, almost a full 10 years before the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And I remember at that time, there was a huge upsurge of interest in UFOs. It was quite something. And we seem to be chasing this story through the pages of the Canberra Times. And this one is the Canberra Times on the 12th of July, 1971. So 3 years after the last meeting, the story says UFO Society meets. The president of the Unidentified Flying Objects Investigations Centre, Mr. F. Phillips, addressed a meeting of the Canberra Unidentified Flying Objects Research Society on Saturday night. Mr. Phillips spoke of the difficulties in obtaining information about unidentified flying objects and outlined the theories of the sources of these objects. Last week, there were a large number of reports of unidentified flying objects in the ACT. And the ACT stands for the Australian Capital Territory, where the city of Canberra is located. The most important of these was sighted on Wednesday night. It was registered by a detector which traced it for 20 minutes. Observers said that they were able to see the object above Mount Majura from 2 miles away with binoculars. The object was not registered on radar. And just like we had a time machine, we're flipping around the years here. Let's go back a few more years to 1966. Once again in the Canberra Times on the 10th of October. UFO body meets. Adelaide, Sunday. The Royal Australian Air Force should be relieved of the duty of investigating unidentified flying objects, and the investigation should be widened to include scientific organisations, the CSIRO, for example. The president of CAPIO, CAPIO, Mr. P.E. Norris, said at the weekend. CAPIO, the Commonwealth Aerial Phenomena Investigation Organisation, held its annual conference in Adelaide this weekend. And finally, we skip forward to the year 1988. On the 28th of January, and once again in the Canberra Times, US TV firm interested in UFO report. Perth. You've seen Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Now brace yourself for Invasion of the Car Snatchers. This could be the scenario if the story of the Knowles family encounter with an alleged UFO on the Nullarbor hits the television screen. A US television production company, Aaron Spelling Productions, best known for its glossy soaps Dynasty and Hotel, was negotiating with Adelaide's Channel 7 for the rights to the story, a Channel 7 spokesman said yesterday. The spokesman said the negotiations were in the preliminary stages and the station's executives were meeting yesterday to discuss the situation. No firm offer had been made. And just briefly, the Knowles UFO story is a famous one in the annals of Australian UFO history. It was a family travelling across the desert and they claimed a UFO, I think, picked up their car at one stage. In an exclusive interview on Channel 7 in Adelaide, they described how a bright light hovered above their car, here we go, then lifted it off the road before slamming it back down, bruising a tyre. The car filled with smoke and there was a foul smell. The Knowles story was given wide news coverage in the United States and did not escape the attention of Aaron Spelling's story scouts, ever on the lookout for new storylines. A spokesman for Aaron Spelling Productions in Los Angeles, Mr. Howard Golden, said yesterday he had been unable to contact the Knowles because they were holidaying in Melbourne. He stressed he was only interested in making a preliminary check but would not explain the nature of his interest. Ah, yes, UFOs. Will they ever go away? No, they will never go away. And is that a bad thing? I don't know. There will always be reports of unidentified flying objects in the sky. Where else would they be? Underwater, maybe? And you too can look for things in the sky, under the water, on the land, or anywhere else by having a search in the Trove archives at trove.nla.gov.au. Have a look today, and you never know. Oh boy, you'll never know what UFOs you might find. Thank you for listening to The Skeptic Zone, and as ever, thank you to my Patreons and PayPal supporters. Without you, there would be no Skeptic Zone for everybody else to enjoy. Because, I got to pay the bills somehow. And if you'd like to chip into The Skeptic Zone, it can be very little. It can be $5 a month if you wish, or something like that. Some people chip in a bit more. Just head to skepticzone.tv and click the subscription link. Check out the Australian Skeptics in the Pub here in Sydney. This week we're having a new Skeptics in the Pub online. Head to skeptics.com.au or go to Meetup and look for AUST Skeptics and join in. That'll be this Thursday night here in Australia. And finally, you can do me a favour, if you're a subscriber or not. If you're on Twitter, you can follow @SkepticZone, and when you see a new episode, I try to tweet about it anyway. I'd love it if you could give that tweet a retweet or a like and help spread the word around. Thank you. But for this week, this is Richard Saunders signing off from Sydney, Australia. You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for show notes, contacts, and to access the back catalogue of episodes going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone podcast on Twitter @SkepticZone, visit our Facebook page, or leave a review on iTunes. You can also support the Skeptic Zone via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone podcast is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed on the Skeptic Zone are not necessarily those of Australian skeptics or any other skeptical organisation. Hello to the people who listen after the show for the Easter egg, the dice game. Something different this week. Something very different. This is where I normally would roll a die and you guess what number comes up. Lots of fun. I thought I'd try something completely different. I've got a deck of cards here. Here we go. Remove the jokers and give them a shuffle. I'm going to stop shuffling in a moment and just look at the top card. And I wonder if you, using your psychic predicting power, can predict either the colour of the card, the suit of the card, or the card itself, or maybe just the number. That's lots of possibilities there. So we'll do it 3 times, see how you go. Are you thinking of a card? Are you thinking of a card? I've stopped. 5 of clubs. So it's a 5, it's a black card, and it's a clubs. I'm going to put that back into the deck. So it's still a full deck. Yes, folks, I'm shuffling with a full deck. Doesn't happen often. And here comes the next one. I'll stop. Card is Queen of Spades. Queen, black card, spades. Here we go. Back into the deck. And the last one. Stop. Turn it over. 3 of hearts. A 3. A red card. And the suitor's hearts. How did you go?